I'm going to be talking about atheism today. And first, I want to confess that I come from a militant atheist background. My folks were militant atheists. They weren't just atheists, they were militant atheists, okay? What was it, in 1962, we moved to Baltimore. And about a year later, there was this lady, and she started American Atheist. Her name was Madeline Murray, and later it became Madeline Murray O'Hare. And it's this lady here, and some of you might recognize her. Let's see if I can put her up here. That's her there with her son John and her daughter Robin. Robin was really her granddaughter, and she adopted her. Okay, she was the daughter of her oldest son, which is William, who became a pastor. So she was an atheist. Her son became a pastor, and that's why she disowned him. Okay. Anyways, she came to our house a couple times. She was becoming famous at the time because she challenged religion in schools, and because of that, she won at the Supreme Court level, and because of that, she was persecuted by private people, who hated her for what she did. So she had to leave Baltimore. Same year that we met her, she came, like I said, she came a couple times to my house, and it turns out that like 23 years later, it was now 1986, 87-ish, thereabouts, I moved and started living in Austin, Texas. And one day I said, hey, I'm going to see if there's a American Atheist branch here in Austin. I looked it up, and I found it in the Yellow Pages. I said, hey, I'm going to go there and see if I can talk to someone. And I went there, and I was greeted by that girl there, Robin. I knew her from pictures. She did appear in the newspapers and so on. And so I was aware of who she was, but it was the first time I met her. And I told her that we had, my folks had, signed up with American Atheists. In fact, my folks were among the first members of American Atheists. And she went in there and said, wait a minute. And she brought a little old lady, which was Madeline Murray. And she came out, and I told her that my folks had been supporters of her. She said, wait a minute. She went in, came out, and brought a card. And she said, anyone who ever gave me money, I have a card. And she showed me the card, had my father's signature. So, and then for those of you who know the story, they were murdered, okay, by one of their employees who had a grudge against her and also wanted to steal their money and did steal their money, and cut them up into pieces and so on, all three of them. So, tragic story, you can look it up, the Murray O'Hare story. Anyways, so I do have a atheist background, very strong atheist background for like 4 years. When I was young, like 13, 14 years old, I started reading the Bible and doing more than just Bible study. I was looking for errors in the Bible, contradictions, and so on. So I did a full study over a period of 3 or 4 years, on and off. And I loved it. I actually liked the book a lot, partly because, not so much because of the stories it's got in it, but because it told me a lot of, about what was important to those people in those days, 2,000, 3,000 years ago. What was important to them? And if you look at the Bible, it's very instructive in that sense, okay? It tells you about the customs, what was important to them, how they married, and what was on their minds, the fact that they wanted to populate the land and things of that nature. It's very interesting. At least it was for me. Anyways, so I do have an atheist background, and because of that, I became you could say a follower. Really, I liked him a lot. Carl Sagan. He was, one of the prominent atheists out there, and so I followed him, and I loved his series Cosmos and so on. In fact, I defended him in college in a speech that I gave, and became a follower of him. And today, I have to say that I not only repudiate atheism, but also everything that Carl Sagan did. He was an ignorant man, very ignorant man, and he just spread ignorance. The problem is that he had a good way of speaking, calm way, and so on. So, that's part of the problem. That he had a magnetic personality, you could say, the way he delivered things. But all the stuff that he delivered was trash, absolute trash. None of what he spoke about, extraterrestrials, contacting them, or someday going out there, anything related to physics, anything related to atheism, all that, total trash. I threw it all away. So none of it survives with me. Okay, so I just want to put all that up front. So what's wrong with atheism? Well, let me give you a quick rundown here of what's wrong with atheism. And the main one is that it's the religion of the mathematicians. That's what it is. It's nothing but that. Okay, so these are the fatal problems with atheism. And it gives you an idea, that it's very tied to mathematical physics. Okay? I think all mathematical physicists, to a certain degree, I think very, very few of them, are not atheists. Okay, so what are the problems? Well, there you see a rundown. Observation. In science, we do not observe. We do not use our eyes. We do not testify. And so, like I said the other day, this is how we do it in science. We have the mafia rule. Kill the witness. Murder the observer. Okay? There are no witnesses allowed to testify in science. Now, in every day, like in law, yes, you do have testimony, witnesses, right? Because you're trying to persuade the jury. Okay, that's forbidden in science. In science we explain so that you understand. Now, when we get to the part of belief, that goes to church. You can take whatever you learned to your own dark basement and do whatever you want with it. But please do not introduce evidence, testimony, witnesses in the court of science. Okay, that's outlawed. That's where science is different than the law. Okay, so yeah, we do not have observers, which is one of the main points of one of the you could say foundations of mathematical physics, which we call mathemagics. Experiments. Do we do experiments? Absolutely not. We don't do experiments in science. Just like you hear. Did you misspeak, Bill? No, I didn't misspeak, so let me repeat it. We do not do experiments in science or in physics, okay? Here's an experiment. Let me tell you why we don't do experiments, okay? Let me remove this for a second so we can see better here. Okay, here you have a spoon, okay? And I'm going to perform an experiment, and I'm going to let it go, and it's going to fall to the table. There it is, okay? Repeatable, so it's scientific because the mathematician says it's got to be repeatable, so here it is, repeatable, okay? Now, can I observe up here or down here whatever's causing the spoon to fall to the ground? Is there something pushing here? Is there something pulling here? I can't see or touch anything. In what way will doing an experiment help me define or find out, discover what's causing this to fall to the ground? And there's absolutely nothing that I can do as far as, vision and touching to elucidate, what's causing this to fall to the ground. And so, yeah, observation and experiments. I mean, what is experiment? See and touch. That's what experiment is. And so we don't see or touch. We don't use our hands, and we do not use our eyes in science. In science, we only use our mind, our brain, and we think and we explain. Okay, you can be a scientist by sitting at your desk, what is known as an armchair physicist. That's the true physicist, the guy who conceptualizes and tries to explain how this universe works, what's out there, what exists, and then put it in motion so that he can explain the causes, the mechanisms. That's what a physicist does. And a physicist doesn't do math, he doesn't do experiments. Okay, so here's the other one, evidence. Do we present evidence? And the answer is no. And you can see that in the case of atheism, everybody talks about evidence. Prove it to me. Show me the evidence that God exists, for example, right? And here, I'm going to show you that God exists. Give me a second here. Let me show you that God exists. Here's God, okay? There it is, okay? You like that? There's God. Any problem? Any questions? You might say, well, Bill, but you presented a two-dimensional God, a picture, could you do a little better? Maybe, present a three-dimensional God that I can see and touch, and I guess we could do that. Isn't that sufficient to prove that God exists? You might say, no, it's not. I really need to see and touch God to make sure that, God exists, to prove it. Okay, so let's bet a beer. Okay, I'll bet you a beer that I can make God appear. I can prove the existence of God. I'll present evidence, which is what you want. Okay, I'm sorry that you are interested in evidence, but that's the way it is. Okay, so I go in there and I say, look, here's go to the kitchen, right? And I bring my wife out. And I say, here it is, three-dimensional God. And you say, are you joking? No, here's God. You wanted to see God, the existence of God, there's God. Yeah, but did she create the universe? Did she create the earth? Did she make a miracle? Can she make anything right now to prove that she's God? And I say, well, I can tell you that this morning she made breakfast, and then she made me do the laundry and made me mow the lawn. So she did make things. And yesterday she made a cake, and tomorrow I don't know what she'll make. But why are you asking that question? What's that got to do with the beer we bet? We bet a beer that she exists, that God exists, and here she is. She's got an apron on. She's got, you can touch her, you can see her. That's God. We were talking about existence, not about what she does or doesn't do. So why are you asking questions about what she makes, what she does? Here's God. You can see and touch it. And so the issue with God is, before we can get to what God did or didn't do, or what he can make or did not make, did he make the universe, did he make the earth, etc., did he make man? Before we can get to any of that, we need to find out what you mean by existence. The bet right now is over existence. And I'm saying here's a 3D God. My wife is a God because she does make me do things sometimes against my will. So yeah, I vouch that she is God. She can do it just by talking. Gives a command and I'm doing it. So how she does it, I don't know. But yeah, I believe in God because she's in the kitchen all the time. Okay. Anyways, what else? They talk about knowledge, whether we know or believe, or specifically that last one there, skepticism. Are you skeptical about God? Well, none of that has anything to do with existence, right? That has to do with belief, with what people believe. Those are opinions. That's got to do with religion. When we talk about existence, it's not a question of belief. It's a question of, what's the definition of exist? And then just follow the definition. And by definition, something exists or doesn't. That's how simple it is. You have prediction. We don't make predictions in science, but they do in mathematics, right? And then you look at the Bible or some of those other holy books and they talk about prophecies and so on. Yeah, I mean, people believe in palm reading, revelations, and so on. What can I say? But that's got nothing to do with science. In science, we do not do predictions. Math does, because math, you have an equation, you calculate the values, and you say, well, I can predict that this is going to happen later on, all else being equal. We don't care about that. We only deal with the past. We deal with explanations of consummated events. Whatever happened, we try to explain how and why it happened, causes and mechanisms. Proof again has to do with evidence and with knowledge. If I can convince you, well, now you have proof of something that I convinced you of. It's got nothing to do with what the other guy believes. Next door neighbor, he doesn't have the same proof. You have juries and you present evidence, and not all of them think alike. Not all the jurors think in the same way or arrive at the same conclusions. And what's happening with mathematical physics, more or less like in religion, in the traditional religions, is they do descriptions. You can say, well, Jesus Christ walked over the surface of the water. Yeah, that's a description. You haven't told me why, how he did it, what caused that to happen. Why didn't he sink? So there's a difference between just a description saying it did happen and another one where you say this is how or why it happened. Okay, those are two different things. And again, we have to separate description, which is how or what you see there, versus explanation, which is what caused it. What's the mechanism that underlies this phenomenon, right? Mathematicians, as well as traditional religions, they rely a lot on authority. In the case of religion, they usually rely on holy books, and in the case of mathematical physics, they rely on the opinions of their teachers. The teachers told them something, and you have to memorize it for the test, and now you know it as well as they do, or you learned it the same way, you memorized it. And now you regurgitate it, you pass it on to other people. And so the question is, is this just an authority being passed from one generation to the next, and like tradition? Is that what it is? Are we going to invoke authority and say, well, Einstein said so? Oh, okay, well, if Einstein said so, I better keep my mouth shut. No, the question is, was he even in the ballpark? And that's a valid question. You should be questioning that every time. It's not a question of skepticism. It's a question if you have a different theory, then you will not accept what came through tradition. Okay, that's the point. Or authority. And then you have democracy. Everybody at the club, votes against you. Say, well, Bill, we don't vote for your theory. We voted for this other theory. Well, yeah, that doesn't mean that because everybody voted for the flat earth theory that you are right and I'm wrong. One of us might be wrong. Maybe we're all wrong, but maybe one of us could be, matching what Mother Nature and Father Universe do out there. Okay, and so, doesn't mean that because there's one person against the rest of the world, that person is wrong. That, in other words, meaning he's not matching what Father Universe and Mother Nature do out there. Okay. And then you have this object in existence. Mathematicians never defined the word object, never defined the word existence, which is going to be what I'm going to be talking about mostly today. And because of that, we don't know whether God is an object or not, or a concept, an abstract concept. And we don't know whether he exists or not. We have all these opinions out there, And so the question is, whether whether you can say that a concept exists. And here, let me give you an example here. You can say, if you're going to say that God created something, like God created the universe, you cannot say that a concept created the universe. Hopefully it's an object, a thing that created the universe, and not intelligence or love that created the universe. That doesn't make any sense. It's irrational completely. So if you're going to talk about creation, something being created, hopefully you put some physical object behind that creation, right? And so you can't use a concept to do things or make things, okay? Only objects do and make things, and if God made something, then God has to be an object. You can't say that God is a concept, okay? And here you have some issues related to physics that are simply irrational when people use concepts as physical objects. And this is just a impromptu list that I made. You have souls do not go to heaven. Consciousness does not float. Floating consciousness leaves my body, goes somewhere, souls or whatever. Space-time doesn't bend. You have number lines, they bend. Well, how does a number line bend? What sense does it make in physics to say that a number line bends? Can't excite a field. You have all these excited fields they talk about, the vibrating fields. What kind of nonsense is that? Field is a bunch of numbers. It's defined as a value at each point in space. Values do not vibrate or, excite or whatever. Can't transfer energy. Energy is a number followed by a value. You can't say you're going to transfer energy. Ether, you can't disturb the ether because ether is not an object, it's a concept. And so again, same with vortex or plasma. You can't fill space with plasma. You can't spiral the vortex or have, say, the vortex is spiraling like a tornado. No, vortex cannot be. You can say air goes around, but you can't say the vortex. Vortex is spinning air already, or water or whatever, right? Pressure, you can't say pressure pushes. People have say stuff like that, or they talk about density. Potential that doesn't weight. The potential is, the thing has gravitational potential. Is potential just waiting there to do something? You can't use potential as a physical object. You can't say it's in there like a ghost waiting to come out. Okay, and you can't wave the wave. So all those notions are irrational. In fact, they have an irrational notion in relativity, famous one, and it's this space money diagram. You have the space money diagram called relativity theory. I think it's got to do with the relativity of your money or your standing in society. And if the money goes up, well, you're rich. If it goes down, well, then you're poor. And hopefully it doesn't go below zero, because otherwise you get into imaginary money, which is what Stevie Wonder invented there. And yeah, you don't want to make a hole in that net. That's your safety net. Okay? If you make a hole in the net, well, then you will go into imaginary money. So all this stuff that they created, is just concepts. It's got nothing to do with physical objects, but they say that, this safety net, the bending of a space safety net is gravity. Yeah, tell me about it. Okay? So yeah, and the safety net, what is it made out of? Number lines. It's not made of dimensions, not made of coordinates, even if it were, but it's not. It's made out of number lines, and you do not work number lines in physics. Okay? So if you're going to give a physical interpretation, you had better use a physical object. And so what happens is, in the end, you have these atheists, agnostics, and theists. The atheist is a disbeliever. The agnostic is a guy who doesn't know whether to believe or not, and the theist is someone who believes. That's the difference between them. And in science, we do not believe. We have no use for belief in science. What we do in science is we say, first we define the word exists, and then we say, let us assume that X exists. And then you explain your theory based on that assumption. That's the way it works in science. And that's why I had to throw all of, completely, all of atheism away. And I say it's the religion of mathematics. Why? Because mathematics, mathematical physics, that's what they do. They say, oh, we believe, we proved, here's the evidence. So they've resolved it all, and I'm saying none of that has anything to do with science, let alone with physics. In physics, we make an assumption, especially about invisible entities such as the mediators of light and gravity, and based on that assumption, you explain your theory, the mechanism, the causes. That's the way it works. And that's why, I had to get rid of both atheism and anything related to mathematical physics. Whatever we've done in the last 100 years has nothing to do with science, let alone with physics.